You know what's strange? Late millennials are often treated like a punchline, like they're just tired 30 somethings with side parts, student debt, and a weird attachment to songs from 2008. But psychologically, this group is one of the most interesting generations. They were young enough to be shaped by the internet, but old enough to remember life before it became the room everyone lived inside. They were promised stability, then handed disruption. Stay with me because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see late millennials. You know the scene. You're sitting on the edge of your bed after work, still wearing the clothes you told yourself you'd change out of 3 hours ago. Your phone is glowing beside you. One app says someone you went to school with just bought a house. Another says someone is quitting their job to travel. Another says the world is on fire again. Somewhere nearby, the fridge hums beside a half empty coffee mug, and the room feels quiet in that strange way where you're not exactly sad, but not okay either. You remember burning CDs, waiting for texts that cost money, logging into early Facebook like it was a secret room. And now you're supposed to understand career pivots, therapy language, rent spikes, AI, and why everyone younger than you seems fluent in a culture that updates every 15 minutes. You're not old, but you're not new anymore. That in between feeling is the emotional fingerprint of late millennials. Psychologists call part of this emerging adulthood a term popularized by Jeffrey Jensen Arnett in a 2000 American Psychologist paper. He described the late teens through the 20s as a stage of identity exploration, instability, self focus, and possibility. But here's where it gets interesting. For late millennials, emerging adulthood didn't end neatly at 25, it stretched. Not because they were lazy, but because the finish line kept moving. Think of adulthood like a video game where each level used to have obvious markers: graduate, get a job, get married, settle down. Late millennials entered the game and realized the map had changed, jobs were unstable. Housing became harder, social media made comparison constant. The old milestone started feeling less like a path and more like a museum exhibit. This is why you can be responsible, emotionally mature, paying bills, and still feel like you're pretending to be an adult. It's not immaturity, it's identity development under unstable conditions. You weren't given a clear bridge from youth to adulthood. You had to build it while walking on it. The second piece is role strain, the pressure of trying to perform too many roles at once. You're supposed to be ambitious but balanced, independent but family oriented, financially smart but still enjoying your life, healed but productive, authentic but employable. Wild, right? The nervous system wasn't designed to carry that many open tabs. And underneath that is self-determination theory developed by Edward Deskai and Richard Ryan and reviewed in American Psychologist in 2000. The theory says people don't just need success to feel okay. They need autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In plain English, you need control, skill, and belonging. Here's the kicker. When every part of life becomes a self-improvement project, even rest starts to feel like failure. That's why you can have a free Sunday and still feel guilty. Your brain is chasing competence, but the scoreboard keeps changing. Barry Schwartz and colleagues explored this in a 2002 Journal of Personality and Social Psychology paper on maximizing versus satisficing. More options can create more anxiety, not more freedom. Imagine standing in a supermarket aisle with 100 kinds of toothpaste. Now replace toothpaste with careers, relationships, cities, identities, and entire versions of your future. That's the late millennial mind, not indecisive, overloaded. But wait, it gets weirder because late millennials are also the bridge generation of social connection. Sociologist Mark Granovetter's famous 1973 paper in the American Journal of Sociology introduced the strength of weak ties. The idea that loose connections and distant networks can open doors that close friends often can't. Late millennials lived the explosion of weak ties in real time. You went from a few friends at school to hundreds of people watching your life from a distance. Old classmates, ex-coworkers, friends of friends, people you met once in 2016 who still view your stories. Social life became less like a village and more like a quiet audience. This creates a strange psychology. You feel visible but not always known, connected but not always held. You can receive birth messages from people who don't know what you're going through. You can post a life update and still feel lonely 10 minutes later. That's not because you're ungrateful. It's because attention is not the same as intimacy. This is why many late millennials crave low maintenance friendships. The friend you can disappear from for 3 months and return to without punishment. The group chat where nobody has to perform. After years of social performance, peace starts looking less like popularity and more like being around people who don't require a costume. And then there's the quiet pressure of comparison. In 1993, Tim Kasser and Richard Ryan published research in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology showing that when financial success becomes too central to a person's life, it's linked with lower well being and mental health. Now imagine growing up in a culture where money is framed as both survival and self worth. That's the late millennial wound. It's not just wanting money, it's feeling like money is proof you didn't waste your potential. It's watching people your age become parents, founders, homeowners, minimalists, or soft life influencers, while you're trying to decide whether ordering food is financially irresponsible. Here's the uncomfortable truth. For some late millennials, flexibility became freedom. For others, it became hiding. There's a healthy version of questioning traditional adulthood, and there's a trauma version where you avoid commitment because every permanent choice feels dangerous. There's a healthy version of independence, and there's a wounded version where you don't ask for help because you learned early that help comes with a cost. Some people call it being chill. Sometimes it's emotional shutdown. Some call it being adaptable. Sometimes it's hypervigilance wearing a better outfit. And some call it being a late bloomer, when really you spent years surviving conditions that made blooming feel unsafe. That distinction matters. Because not every delay is failure, but not every delay is peace either. Sometimes I'm just figuring it out is actually grief. Grief for the timeline you thought you'd have. Grief for the adulthood was advertised to you. Grief for how long you had to be strong without feeling stable. But here's the reframe. You're not broken. You're wired for depth over noise. You're not behind. You're adapting to a world that's changed the rules mid-sentence. You're not childish for wanting meaning from your work, softness in your relationships, and a life that doesn't feel like one long performance review. You're trying to build an adulthood that your nervous system can actually live inside. Late millennials are not the generation that failed to grow up. They're the generation that noticed growing up needed a rewrite. You carry analog memory and digital fluency. You remember boredom before it became a luxury. You remember friendship before it became content. You know what it's like to be unreachable, and you know what it's like to be reachable all the time. That gives you a strange gift. You can translate between worlds. You can understand people who value stability and people who value fluidity. You can question tradition without dismissing it. You can crave security without worshiping it. Bridge generations get stepped on from both sides, but bridges also connect things that would otherwise stay separate. So maybe the psychology of late millennials isn't really about nostalgia, burnout, or being old now. Maybe it's about living through the collapse of one life script and quietly writing another. Not louder, not flashier, just more honest. You were never late. You were arriving in a world that kept changing the address. If this hit home, subscribe to the Psyche Code. And if you want to support these deeper dives, hit the join button. If this resonated, you'll probably love the next video on the psychology of people who feel older than they are. Click to find out why.